I absolutely love no code, probably like the most because of this category.
Yeah.
I am a really strong believer that no code really, really helps make this type of building, this type of work really accessible for people. Um, One of the beautiful things that I love about having such a strong community and being so connected with our no code and our Voiceflow builders is being able to see people like this, who can hop on the platform, the same platform that large teams and enterprises are using, and be able to build something really meaningful. Like we have fathers in like Idaho who build a diabetes tracker app to like teach their little kid what foods they can eat on the same playing field as someone at Uber who's building a conversation design. Like that just
Welcome to The Future is No Code. My name is David. I'm joined by Emily Lonetto from Voiceflow. If you guys don't know what Voiceflow does, they're an amazing no-code platform for actually setting up voice commands on Google and Amazon Alexa. It's like really crazy to see no-code now start to move in even further directions than maybe people traditionally thought about no code. So I'm sure we'll get into with the definition when we get to that portion of this. So excited to get their perspective. She is the head of growth there. I'm really excited to talk with you today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. All right, let's jump into this thing. If you guys don't know the format, we do a little what is no code section. We try to figure out how it's going to affect everybody. You know, this has big implications for all types of people. Give a little bit of predictions where I'll try to hold you accountable for giving us some monthly or like year approximations for those predictions, and then a final story about why you're super excited about the space. So let's jump in. Okay, so when did you get into no code, and then what made you want to join Voiceflow?
Yeah, I think that I got into no code before I kind of knew what no code was. I think it was more, I feel like that's how a lot of people get into it.
Yeah.
So I guess I started playing around with no code tools maybe like 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. My intro being Zapier, the holy grail of integrations.
Yeah.
No, I think for me, being in a growth position and really being in growth for a while in my career, I've always been at this intersect of technical and non-technical, and I've always found no code as this beautiful like mix of those things. So I kind of discovered no code that way by first playing around with stuff on my own to try to play around with building or expediting how I become more technical, and then soon realized how powerful that was to just get integrated with work. So now it's really, really part of the tech stack that I use on a day-to-day basis and teach amongst even my own team, but outside of that. So why not join a company like Voiceflow, who's going to make a really big impact in the voice space and the no-code space?
Yeah. It's definitely awesome to get your perspective from, hey, we're trying to automate part of our workflows and do a little more of like internal no code type of things, because we've also have a lot of perspective from like the startup side of things as well. So always great to get all the different sides. Awesome. All right. So what is your definition of no code? And again, this is always easier to answer when you maybe kind of think about what do you include in that bucket, and then what do you not include in that bucket?
I think for me, I have like a pretty loose definition of no code. I think like some people are very binary around it, where it's like no code equals like zero code ever. If you see brackets, it is scary. No, versus it having a little bit of leeway in there. I view no code as you can get the majority, maybe like the 80% done without really having any basic knowledge there. With the option of being able to get a little bit more custom and open that up. So for me, I would say my definition of no code is a platform or a software that makes it easier for people to expedite how they can get to an MVP. So how can they build the foundation of something without having to rely too heavily on dev resources or a technical background?
Awesome. Okay, then I think then pulling out the key there is you are saying though that like the end result is some sort of like product or it solves some sort of problem that didn't otherwise exist. Is that's a little bit what I'm hearing?
Yeah, like I the way that I view it is that it's a way that you're going to be able to solve an existing problem or try to optimize, let's say, a flow that you're already working on, without having to be this technical wizard or without having to learn how to code. So it really
Awesome.
helps to democratize what's possible.
Perfect. All right. So again, this space, like you talked about, I got into no code before it was called no code. So it definitely hasn't always been called no code. But when do you think that kind of started? And then do you actually have somebody that maybe you credit with like making that more of the mainstream, like what we're going to call this movement?
Yeah, I think like I can't pinpoint it to an exactual moment where I was like, oh yes, this must be no code. I think the way that it was introduced to me was really more of I think it's a problem that actually exists both in startups and also in large orgs, but just like lack of resources and also
Hmm.
like lack of time to like learn on yourself
Yeah.
on your own time. And so it was introduced to me unofficially as no code by one of my mentors at a company that I used to work at called Tilt, which got acquired by Airbnb, so RIP. But it basically got introduced to me because I like wasn't on the technical team, was building out new things, but was constantly stuck waiting for something to happen. And he was like, "Oh, you should just try here, like a few tools here." It started with him building Ruby apps that I would go on the back end and go and change, to him being like, "Oh, there's other ways that you can get customized with this." So that's kind of how it first started. And I think that more recently, what I've seen, and maybe in the last like few years, you've seen companies like Zapier really start to like own that space. Companies like Webflow, who literally made a conference called No Code Conf, which was awesome. And I really, really hope that it happens again this year.
Yeah, I know. I know.
ah, but I think that there's a ton of people that are really, really latching onto that. And even you have examples like Ben at MakerPad, who's made an entire business around really trying to empower these makers around the world and make it more possible for people to discover these tools. Because I still think there's a little bit of not so much a category definement moment of people understanding what no code is, but still trying to figure out what tools can solve or what's even possible with no code tools right now.
Awesome. And then just one little class kind of subconscious grammatical debate that we seem to have as a space right now. Do you classify, or what team are you on? Are you on no dash code or are you on no space code?
No space code.
All right,
Uh,
no space code.
yeah, no space code, hardcore.
All right, awesome. I'm like particularly excited about all the different responses that I'm getting there, so we can have different teams start forming. Okay, now actually getting into the really exciting part of this series, really how this is going to affect everybody, right? I think we're all excited about this. It's going to have wide-ranging impacts. So let's kind of break down some of the different sections here. We'll start with businesses. So what do you think this is going to mean for entrepreneurs, for startups, for small businesses? And then what about, the larger organizations to enterprises?
So I think especially I'm lucky enough that I've been able to kind of play in both of those camps, and I've definitely been very bullish on it both times.
Yeah.
But for smaller ones, it makes so much more possible with a smaller team. Like especially even now where all of our teams are separated, and like resourcing is always going to be an issue no matter what size you are. But when you have people who are trying to level up, who are trying to learn, who are trying to cross collaborate, these tools make it so much more possible to get everyone on a level field, that I think that it really, really helps to let companies get more out of the team that they have, and also keep people more motivated, where they feel like they're making something as well as being able to optimize on stuff, which I think often gets lost when you get into a large company where you have hyper segmented roles of builders versus optimizers. So I think that's like one side of it. And it's also crazy affordable in comparison to having to hire that out or having to really invest a ton of time in projects that you might not know might work. And from the growth perspective, it really opens it up in terms of experiments that you can run, which is particularly fascinating for me. On the larger org, what I kind of found was, so for context, I used to work on the growth team for a company called Clio, which is a massive Series D company that has like 500 plus people, like could stomp on Voiceflow if they wanted to in terms of how many people that they have, but definitely would not. and the way that no code worked within that and the way that I see it really, really possible, or where it benefits a lot, is that it helped to expedite a lot of even, let's say, project validation that you were trying to get, so people could get to a prototype faster to make a more convincing pitch for something. People could potentially get things procured faster because it wasn't living within like their database. It was something that was a little bit separate. So that you're seeing kind of this workflow optimization that comes into play. And also just like how easy it is to understand and get going. It makes onboarding a lot faster, especially if you're playing around with new people on the team, or if you're even just subsequently doing like hackathons or ways to just try to get people to learn more internally. So I think there's a lot of wins on both sides.
Awesome. All right. So next up is more of like, how this is going to affect the traditional tech, industry. So, that's your traditional designers, your traditional, your UX designers, your developers, your PMs, and then maybe like if you also have any insight potentially of how you think this will impact the actual workflows between them as well in terms of, dev design handoff or any of that stuff as well.
Yeah, I mean, like this is a 100% a conversation we have all the time at Voiceflow. So definitely interested in answering it. So the way that I see it, I'll kind of answer it from designers, PMs, and devs, and then we'll talk about the workflow. But
sure.
With designers, I think that no code has been an incredibly empowering movement for them. Where, like, for instance, myself, I come from a design background, and I loved being able to make these like beautifully comprehensive designs on my computer, but they didn't breathe. They couldn't, and I mean that in a way where like people couldn't interact with them. And there's something a little bit special about seeing how those movements, how the actual interactions play. And it kind of sucks sometimes to have this thing and not be able to fully communicate it, or be kind of left behind when you're trying to get that to come to life. So I think no-code tools have really made designers supercharged when it comes to being able to animate a lot of the stuff that they're doing, make them live, create websites, web apps, like marketplaces. There's so many things that they've done. And I think that that's really been a really powerful movement for them. In terms of developers, I think about this as like expediting everything. No code in a lot of ways is like the bootstrap of trying to get something done. And it's like, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be your final product that you're doing, but it's going to be so much freaking faster to get that structure out there that you're going to be able to play more, do more, maybe try that thing that would have otherwise taken a really long time to learn, which we've seen a lot, especially with developers who aren't familiar with building for voice. It's a weird space and it's still new. And with PMs or non-technical members on teams, it has totally opened up not only more ways for them to be able to bring MVPs to life, get their hands dirty on things, but also build empathy towards other people on their team. Like I personally find that by diving into no-code tools, I've actually learned more about the logic and expectations and complexities behind what I'm asking for, which has made me, I believe, more empathetic as a leader, but also in terms of how I manage or expect what can be accomplished in a scope. So I think that's a big thing there.
Yeah. And I'm like particularly fascinated by, you guys at Voiceflow right now, from what you just said, in the sense of like, there aren't many, or it's, voice dev is not as big, let's say, as like app dev, or, there aren't necessarily like I mean, I'm not in that space as much, but I don't know of any like voice like dev shop. It's not as prevalent, right? So it's like, it's interesting, how you all now being a no code tool for that will be like the first introduction to some actual product teams life as developers, but with that handoff between them now being like all done potentially through Voiceflow, like without any of that stuff. So yeah, I'm like fascinated to see how those types of no code platforms will get introduced to the traditional tech world, where like they maybe have like a product that's a regular SaaS product. It's way too complex right now to move into a no code tool like no code web app or something like that, but there'll be the introduction to that process from platforms like Voiceflow that we'll be able to see, oh, like how does that PM like deal with that in like a new setting, and not have to worry about like, oh, we're kicking out this other process. It's more like, well, we're adding to that process with a no code platform.
Yeah, like I think we talk about the workflow aspect a lot. And you hit it on the nail. Like voice is where mobile development was like a decade ago, where it was a new thing. People didn't really know how to do it. So you had a lot of web devs who just like shrunk things to fit into a tiny screen.
Yeah.
It was awful. And then we hit a phase now where we have entirely new code bases that are optimized for that, and businesses that almost exist entirely in mobile. So that shift happened because of tools that were there in the introductory phase, teaching that logic, building that empathy, trying to create those structures, but also then gaining that interest so people can do more and get more complicated with things later. So I think where we really focus on with Voiceflow is really splitting and making the three elements of the process very easy. So design, prototype, and the actual build. So getting it directly onto Alexa or Google. So the way that we've seen it is, from a design standpoint, we're in this interesting case where what you type and you actually building whatever happens in the blocks is, it's almost ready to be published at that point. You're not visually designing anything. You're really thinking about, how do you make a conversation not feel weird?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what's funny about that is that's so important to the success of that often you can't just hand a script over to a dev and expect the dev to check it grammatically to make sure that it sounds proper in English or whatever language it is, and build it correctly. So Voiceflow creates this even like level playing field where every single player can come in. There's real-time collaboration, so you see the designers work, there's comments, there's markup, and the developers can go in and add whatever custom code that they need. The PMs can go through and prototype and go through the testing module, and you can share it with whatever stakeholders that you have. So it's a very transparent and very collaborative experience with it. And we've tried to create what is otherwise a very non-visual building experience into something that's, we hope, and we think our tool is very beautiful, but has made it
I do too.
very, very visual.
I do too. All right. So moving on to the next group here, consulting. So what do you think this is going to mean for your traditional dev shops? What do you think this is going to mean for freelancers today, maybe freelancers that aren't into any of these new things like voice? And then what do you also think this is going to mean for the kind of or not totally opposite, but the non-dev consultants, the big, maybe traditional consulting groups?
So we've already seen huge interest and huge spikes in terms of freelancers and consultants, starting with voice. Like a quick search on Fiverr, Upwork, or whatever other platforms you're looking at, you will find them. I like regularly look them up because I try to convert them. But
Nice growth tactics. Nice growth tactics.
There you go. Growth tips. But it's really, really exciting. And so much so that like we've even had pressure already to start a pretty formalized partner program. I think that the consultants and the freelancers that get on the space now are going to be in that sweet era that happened with mobile not too long ago, where people didn't have in-house teams as often and started to realize that this channel is going to become a big player. And I think that what we've definitely seen, even in like the last few months, with more people spending time at home, the usage and the spikes alone and people adopting and going to that next
Yeah.
stage of not just exploring what the tool can do, but now like trying to master it has just been unbelievable. So I think that we're going to see more and more of that, and the early time that they spend in the space now is going to pay mass dividends later.
Awesome. Okay, and then the last one is kind of a little bit of a catch-all category, but society as a whole, right? So not necessarily like the business world type of things, but what is this going to mean for our personal lives? What is this new wave of no code going to mean for our kids, for their education, and what do you think this can mean for economic disparity?
I absolutely love no code, probably like the most because of this category.
Yeah.
I am a really strong believer that no code really, really helps make this type of building, this type of work really accessible for people. One of the beautiful things that I love about having such a strong community and being so connected with our no code and our Voiceflow builders is being able to see people like this. Who can hop on the platform, the same platform that large teams and enterprises are using, and be able to build something really meaningful. Like we have fathers in like Idaho who build a diabetes tracker app to like teach their little kid what foods they can eat on the same playing field as someone at Uber who's building a conversation design. Like that doesn't happen in the same way with a lot of other platforms. And I think that more and more as no code becomes more on the front lines of things and more accessible to like younger kids and even older generations, you're going to see more innovation happening in that space, and even easier ways for people to be able to get jobs or jump to different career options. Not only because it's more accessible, but now because they can do a lot more learning at home. So I think it's going to make a huge difference moving forward.
Awesome. Yeah, I know that's has definitely been a theme already through some of the interviews that we've had here. Everybody really excited about this potential to level the playing field in a sense, and just have software move to a more accessible but also more personalized for the people that maybe it wasn't personalized before. All right. So the next group of questions is all about predicting the future. Like I said, this is definitely a very difficult one. So excited for your answers. Let's see. So first up, when do you think it'll be as common to make an app as it is to make a PowerPoint presentation?
Number one, I no longer use PowerPoint. I'm Sheets.
Oh yeah, I know. No, I just, yeah, well, there's a little bit, I guess, I should have phrased that question as like a slide deck or like, yeah, Google Slides or any type of, I guess PowerPoint.
I would say like I've already started to see people shipping like very rough MVPs or like skeletons with no code in replacement of like, here's like my 10 slides of me trying to convince.
I guess I meant, I'm trying to phrase that question wrong. I meant like, so today, like I'd say, you use PowerPoints or slides for all kinds of different things, right? It's pretty commonplace for it to be like in a classroom or like for my sales, presentation internally or externally. So I'm saying like, it's pretty common today for that to be a thing. So I'm saying, when do we think that it'll be as common as it is to do that, as it is to make, let's say, an app or something out of no code?
I would say like, maybe like give it another like 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. I like it. All right. Next up. So when do you think, we've already seen some colleges start to embrace this, but when do you think like a lot of colleges will start to like actually teach, hey, here is like no code. Here are all the things that you're supposed to be doing with no code. And then kind of similarly, when do you think that'll maybe work its way to grade school?
My like inner optimist wants to be like, the second that schools are back in there.
Yeah, I know. It's like, why not?
At least do it. What I've seen is like education's a tough one because curriculums are really, really hard to innovate in, and that's the truth. But we've already started to see no code solutions be kind of slipped into curriculum. Like Voiceflow happens to already be taught in a few universities,
Awesome.
which is super cool. And I love that. But I think in terms of mainstream, I would hope like maybe realistically like 5 years
Okay.
where
All
like
right.
no code could be in the
Yeah.
title of the curriculum.
Yeah. 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 All right. Awesome. So next one, when do you think there will be more products launched on Product Hunt that are built without or like with no code tools than there are with maybe traditional coding?
I feel like it's like already pretty on par right now.
Yeah. All right.
Like,
Yeah, I know.
uh,
It's definitely interesting because it's like, how do you know? But like, yeah, so it's a little bit of like, I don't know how we're gonna know when this one happens, but
I mean, like, I think the beauty of no code is like you kind of don't always know.
yeah.
And like that's kind of the sweet part about it. I want to think that it's already pretty there
Okay.
on Product Hunt. So maybe like a year, let's
All right,
say.
cool. Awesome. All right, let's see. Next up. So when do you think we'll get a product? And this one's definitely a little more skewed to it being like a true product, not necessarily like an e-commerce store or like a, an organization or something like that. Just the way this phrase, not that I wasn't saying that's not part of no code, but so when do you think we'll see like a product at the level of popularity and users of, let's say, like a Trello or TurboSax that's built on a no code platform, be that an app or, a voice system, whatever that is?
Ooh, so you mean like a platform? Sorry, not a platform. A product that was built on a no-code platform.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, not an actual, not a Voiceflow or an Adalo. I'm not saying us. I'm saying like
Built
the built one. Yeah.
Again, inner optimist wants to be like tomorrow, but I would say maybe like well, hopefully maybe in like 2 to 3 years, you're going to start to see some pretty on par solutions. And I know like that's already starting to happen, but it's the same kind of issue with the product and thing is like, how
Yeah.
do you fully know unless
Yeah.
you're like very open about it? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. And then when do you think one of those will IPO?
Oof. I mean, okay, I'm gonna be pretty like conservative on this one, given
Okay,
the
all
market.
right. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Like 20 years. Like,
Okay, all right.
companies that won't touch it for a really long time. Right?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. When do you think there will be more freelancers and agencies and dev shops that use no-code platforms than there are ones that don't?
Oof. Maybe like I don't know, like maybe like 6 years, I would say. There's already like a lot of agencies that kind of build both.
Yeah.
But I think to outweigh maybe like 6, 8, a little bit
Okay.
longer. I think it's gonna take a while.
Okay. All right. All right. And the final one, which I'm like most excited about hearing, when do you think our global leaders, and these are like any global leader, when do you think they'll start talking about no code?
Oof. I mean, like I would say probably like more openly, maybe like a year, 2 years. I would say. I
Okay.
think that there's so much noise in it already, and there's so many people that are
Yeah.
talking about it more frequently. Just to stay relevant, they got to do it.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I'm like super excited for like, because I've been asking everyone this question like for like when I'm like, look, there's an article and someone said it. All right. Final question. So, obviously everyone's really excited about this space. We work really hard, especially all of us, on the product teams at all these, or just at the teams in general of all these places. So let's see, what's the most interesting thing maybe you've seen either or they built, or what's just a really awesome story about no code that kind of keeps motivating you to keep going?
Yeah, I think that what really keeps me motivated is hearing a lot of stories of people who felt stuck in their current jobs or like were waiting for that opportunity to transition into a PM or a technical role for like years at a company. Um, and then discovered one of these tools and started to build these things, and actually were able to make the move where they were able to support themselves full time and even build a team around no code tools, which I think is so freaking empowering.
Yeah.
And we get the chance, and like I love talking to people on Twitter about this all the time, that were able to like feel confident enough in what they were able to bring to the table that they could compete with things that are out there or people that were out there that had more technical experience. So I think like those stories alone are really, really amazing. And there's like a ton even that I find are really adorable of like
Yeah.
kids who have built really cool stuff,
Yeah.
and parents and like technical parents who are spending time teaching their younger kids how to build things, whether it's on like Scratch or whether it's on even like playing around with like Webflow or Squarespace or things like that. I think that it's a really beautiful way of almost like thinking about how we used to build stuff with like Connects and Lego,
Yeah. Yeah.
transforming it onto the web. And I think that it's going to be something that's really, really beautiful and like continuing to grow long term.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. Adding the voice perspective in this was really invaluable. I'm love everything you guys do over there. Everything looks beautiful. So thank you so much. Keep up the no code voice game strong over there. All right. Thanks. Thanks again.
Thanks so much.
All right. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.